Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Sacred Priestess Podcast, where I help beautiful awakening women activate their sacred feminine power so that they can find clarity, connection, and confidence in their spiritual healing journey as we move through this amazing time of awakening. I'm Hayley, and once again, I would love to thank you so much for being here with me this week as we talk about our throat chakra today. I know that we all have a huge thing with our throat chakra. There are so many women that I talk to who have blockages in this space, who have been to readings and told they've had blockages in this space, to Reiki healings and told that, and, have done inner child where it's come up. So today we're talking about the courage to speak our truth and why at this time it is so important for us to be doing so. This subject has been coming up in the community. It's been coming up almost every week. I do in my private Facebook group. I'll put the link below. Please join us in there. We do a weekly midweek message. And over the last few months, Aphrodite has brought through her key pleasure along with the throat chakra over the last few months at least 4 times. It is something that is consistently coming up for everyone. So it's been coming up in that. It's also just been coming up in conversations that I've been having in my real life with the people around me. And it's because the divine feminine is rising. We know this in this time of awakening, that this is a huge thing that's happening right now, that our voices are ready to be heard. And part of the healing, part of the process is for us to really start doing that, and doing that in a few different ways, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This is about the throat chakra healing personally and collectively, and it is in conjunction with healing the sacred womb, with healing that womb space, stepping into womb wisdom and, really activating the sacred feminine power, the divine feminine that lies within us. So that's why all of this is coming up. That's why this message is so consistent. And if you've been getting this message consistently, if you've been feeling this within you consistently, then definitely stay with me for the rest of this podcast, because this is something that is going to help you move through this, understand this, and hopefully just give you a little bit of that validation of why this stuff's coming up and why it does feel like an ongoing journey, And we need to remember that this process is an ongoing journey. It's not like, oh, we'll just have one Reiki and clear our throat chakra and then, we're fine. Because the one thing that we forget about in the healing space is that the doing is just as important as the clearing. We need to get in the habit of doing the things that we're about to talk about. It's not enough just for us to go, oh, well, I've been wearing a lapis lazuli around my neck, so I'll be fine. Or, oh, I went and had a Reiki 2 weeks ago and she cleared stuff out, so I'll be fine. We need to actually be starting to consistently, like I said, do the things that we're about to talk about. So it is an ongoing journey, and it's been an ongoing journey for me. This is something that has really been a big thing throughout my life. And I think because I am part of the divine feminine, of bringing the divine feminine forward at this time, we all have our own jobs to do during this awakening. For some, it's in politics. For some, it's in schooling. For some, it's in healing with Reiki. For some, whatever it is. And mine is, like, personally and collectively, to be bringing forward and bringing through the divine feminine and the voice of the divine feminine. So this is why this is something that's been a consistent thing for me throughout my lifetime. And like I said, will be for the rest of it while I continue to practice bringing my voice forward. The throat chakra is not just about communication. I think when we talk about chakras, we get really compartmentalized into, oh, well, the throat chakra is communication and the sacral chakra is passion and the heart chakra is this. And we've got to remember that there's so much more depth to everything than that, and it's a great place to start. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking that, but it's so much more than that. And the throat chakra is so much more than just communication. It's about truth, it's about honesty, it's about expression. It's about feeling deeply heard, and we can't be deeply and properly heard if we're not being honest, if we're not expressing authentically. we're not going to be heard because we're not actually saying or expressing the truth. And so people aren't hearing our truth. And so therefore we don't feel heard, if that makes sense. I know that sounds a little bit all over the place, but I'm pretty sure you might get what I mean. So, the throat chakra allows truth, your truth, to move through you. It's about how you're allowing your womb center and what is within your womb center to move up through your power center, move up through your heart center, and then express through your throat. So it's a process that moves through all of these things. So yes, maybe you're getting your throat chakra cleared, but if there's stuff going on in your heart chakra, if there's stuff going on in your womb center where you're not actually fully, truly owning, honoring, connecting into your passions, your desires, your wants, your needs, your emotions, then you're not going to be expressing properly. And so your throat chakra will be blocked in alignment with that as a as a sidebar of that. I forgot the word that I'm trying to look for. So, we have to make sure that when we're looking into chakras that we're not just going, oh, it's the throat. Like there's always other things going on everywhere. And I know that there's also links between certain chakras. Like there is a divine link between the throat and the sacral and the womb center, and the heart and I think it's the heart and the third eye, whatever it is. So there's that, but it even goes deeper than that again. Like we can't just keep going, okay, well, this is what everyone says, so this is what it is. We have to have discernment and we have to trust our intuition in how our chakras are working together and what needs to be kind of looked at. Because if there's something going on in one chakra, it's usually the result of quite a few different centers that all have something to do with it as well, if that makes sense. So, we can talk all day about why women have struggled to speak their truth. And we speak about it a lot on this podcast because, like I said, it is the healing that we are doing collectively and personally at this time as the divine feminine is rising. So I know that most of you here are already well aware of, the suppression of the divine feminine, not just, we think a lot about recent history, when we talk about, which we'll talk about in a second, like about witch wounding and things like that. But this is yes, the witch wounding was a big part and, it's sort of a closer history for us, but this has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years, right? Right back to the beginning of Mu, Lemuria, these ancient civilizations where the agenda and these nefarious beings started to really take over the divine feminine, because this is not predominantly, but this was actually constructed as a divine feminine planet. The organic templating of this planet is more in the divine feminine. And yes, we need the balance and we're bringing back that balance. But, this planet was originally a feminine planet where feminine beings use parthenogenesis to create more beings. And if you're creating am I saying that right now? Now, when I say it, it sounds wrong. But, divine birth, where women are just creating by themselves through, divinity. You can only recreate the feminine because you don't have the Y chromosome. So this was originally a divine feminine planet, and the wars that have happened across the universe from this nefarious collective of beings who just go around just destroying everything, they understand the power of the feminine. And a lot of the galaxies, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, galaxies, collectives, races that they've targeted have been predominantly in the divine feminine. They have worshipped the divine feminine. They are more in tune with the divine feminine because they understand the power of the divine feminine. And so that's why it's so suppressed on this earth, and that's where they started, with making sure that our connection to earth, the divine feminine Gaia, our connection to Christ Sophia, the divine feminine goddess, I should say, the practices that we used to practice in terms of womb connection and womb wisdom, the honor and respect we have for that, that's, they started there. They started by implanting males on this planet once we'd gotten to that point with certain things so that they started dishonoring the feminine, dishonoring the womb. So that's what's been targeted. And so it's just making sure that our connection to the womb, connection to our intuition, to our wisdom, to our emotions, to our truth are not being expressed. So we also, understand that, they took down the mystery schools so that they were taking down again that connection, that we had to go into underground temples, that we had to practice in secrecy. So straight away, we're not allowed to actually voice what we're doing. We're not actually allowed to voice our intuition and this was way before the witch wounding. So all of these practices were forced underground. The teachings were forced underground. We weren't allowed to support any of this. And if we were seen to be supporting or working in any of this, we were persecuted. And then of course we get closer where we've got witch wounding, where we have society starting to, make sure that women obviously weren't allowed to express their intuition. We weren't allowed to have opinions, we weren't allowed to vote. We weren't allowed to express, anything political or to do with community because we didn't know what we were talking about. So our opinions weren't honored. We were not, if we were too much in our emotion and we were expressing emotion, then we were hysterical, and our husbands were allowed to lock us up in a mental institution because we were hysterical. We weren't allowed to speak against our husbands. We had to just watch all the things that they did with affairs and mistresses and dirty dealings, whatever it was, and we just had to be quiet. We weren't allowed to see that. So we weren't honoring, not only our emotions and the way we felt, but we weren't honoring our truth in what our morals were, right? And what we believed in and what we believed to be right and wrong. We just had to be quiet about that as well. So, you guys know this. You know how much we've been suppressed in this area. So we've also got obviously ancestral patterning. We've got the stuff that comes down through the mother line with all of this same stuff, right? With all of, not only the path of the priestess, and if we're from a lineage of priestesses, a lineage of intuitives, but also how we do look at relationships with men and the patriarchy. And again, men and the patriarchy are not the same thing. We've got the patriarchy as, and I don't even like saying it's the patriarchy, but, just for the purpose of understanding, like the patriarchy with what we're living by is a system. It's not all men, and it's not divine, obviously it's not divine and masculine, but I mean, like, it's not all men. And so we need to make sure that we're not getting those two things confused and two things too smushed together, because the agenda of the patriarchy and us calling it the patriarchy is once again to just pit men against women. If it's the patriarchy that's doing this, then men are horrible, and that's not, we need to step out of that. But, we do have to look at the way that, as how we've been taught to view relationships between men and women. We're coming out of, it wasn't that long ago that, you see it on the TV, right? I mean, not to say that, all movies and TV shows are the be all and end all, but it was, and you didn't do divorce. And so if your husband was cheating and your husband was having a load of affairs and your husband wasn't a very nice person, if your husband was not to trigger anyone, but if your husband was violent, you didn't do anything about it. You didn't say anything about it. And if you've come from a line of women that have moved through that, you hold that within you. You hold that within your body, within your womb. And like I said, I don't want to get into a load of triggering subjects on this podcast, but you know where I'm heading with this, and the violation of the womb, the violation of the vajayjay, the violation of, what is the holy grail within us. Our womb, our ovaries, that whole system is the holy grail. It is the chalice. And, this is another thing that has been suppressed within us, and, that's made us disconnected from that space. Again, I've had this conversation before and I can talk about it forever. Even as women, we deny our womb. We hate on our womb. We get angry towards, this beautiful space within us. And 99% of why, we have so many issues with our womb space physically is because of all of this suppression, because of the hatred towards it, the anger towards it, the denial of it from both men and women. And so this is something that we're really bringing forward now. This has kind of gone off the subject of the throat chakra, but this is all the stuff that contributes, right? So, and of course, the other thing is, that contributes to this is childhood wounding, childhood beliefs, what you learned in childhood in your teens about being able to speak up. As children and teens, we get told all the time, you don't know anything. Why would you say something that silly? Why are you asking that question? Or, like anything that we try to express is, for a lot of people is deemed as silly. Why are you being so emotional? Why are you getting upset about that? That's silly. That opinion, like you don't know anything because you're only a teenager, you don't know anything about life. Like we have all of this. My throat's getting, do you hear that, you guys? Trigger. So, that's a lot of stuff that comes up for us. So over these last few months, like I said, there's a lot of stuff been coming up within the community, in the Facebook group, around the truths that we are really being asked to express and step into. So these 3 truths are the truths about our wants, our needs, and our desires. What do we want from life? What do we want from this day? What do we want from our relationships? What do we want from our work? What are our desires? What do we want to express? What do we want to experience? What do we, and what are our needs? What are our needs around boundaries? What are our needs for our physical body? What are our needs for our emotional and mental well-being? And we need to be able to speak these forward. And like I was saying before, we have to be doing that. We can't just go, oh, well, I've had a Reiki on my throat, so I'll be fine. You then have to actually start speaking your truth. And I think a lot of the trap that we get into is, oh, well, I still can't speak my truth, so I must have more healing to do. Sometimes the healing is just actually speaking your truth. You have to actually do the things. This is the physical is part of our spiritual healing. So you can do a Reiki, you can clear out some emotions, you can, journal about it, all of those things. But you also have to bring it into embodiment by actually expressing it. And if you're not doing that, then you're just going to continue to then put another block, emotional block, put in another energetic block if you're not expressing. I hope that makes sense. So the other truth that we're being asked to bring forward is our beliefs in our spirituality, our beliefs in connection to the divine feminine, our beliefs in womb wisdom, our beliefs in our intuitive gifts, that we believe, in all of these different things, and speaking that, and I say this so many times on this podcast as well, you don't speak, whenever you speak to a Catholic, like a true Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, they don't stand there going, oh, like I just kind of go to church and, oh, it's silly really, it's just a bit of woo-woo. They don't do that. They're so strong in their beliefs, and you need to be strong in your beliefs around the divine feminine, about your dragon connections, about your fairy connections, about the connections to the multidimensional frequencies, about your beliefs in past life connection, karmic, whatever, your intuition, your psychic gifts. We need to start speaking truth into that. We need to also, the third truth is having like the truth in our wisdom. So actually trusting and speaking the wisdom that is coming from the womb, allowing your lived experience to help others. And I'm not talking about always giving unsolicited, intuitive, and, personal advice, but when you are in circle and somebody is going through something and you're in a group of friends and they do say, I don't know what to do, if you feel called to use your own lived experience or your own intuition that's being guided to come through you, then do that through your heart. Again, not unsolicited, only if it's been asked for. But, these are the truths that we need to start speaking. These are the truths that need to start coming through, because when we do this and when we stand up and we start voicing our truth, that divine feminine collective voice gets stronger, and it will get to a point where it is that strong where it cannot be distorted, where no amount of dark force, implants, like I said, distortion, frequency interruptions can break that down. So as we are healing personally in this space, as we are speaking our truths individually, we are pulling that into collective healing. Because you've got to remember, all the healing that you're doing around your throat chakra and your womb is not only yours. We have all experienced the same thing. We all have witch wounding. We all have ancestral patterning through, like I was saying before, all of the things that we've talked about. Not being allowed to express opinion, not being allowed to be emotional because otherwise you're hysterical. We all have that within us. And so as we're doing that personally, we're healing in a massive collective way, bringing the divine feminine voice back. And like I said, once we're holding that at a certain level, it will not be able to be broken down, which is amazing. And it's so exciting, right? On Friday in the Facebook group, Fridays I do like a little mini priestess teaching. And Friday, Mother Mary actually came forward for this. She usually comes forward with the throat chakra, wrapping us up in her beautiful blue crystalline energy. And she just floated some beautiful healing through the throat, the ears, and in connection with our womb. But the biggest message that came forward for her is that it's now safe to speak. It is safe to speak your truth. We are at a point where, the divine feminine has gotten to the level where it's okay. We all have each other. We all, there are so many of us doing it. There are so many of us rising to the occasion, and stepping into our purpose of healing this stuff and bringing this forward. So we are in a time where it is safe to speak. So she brought through a lot of safety. And if you would like to work with her, call her forward, call Mother Mary forward and say, please help me to feel safe to speak my truth, to feel safe to speak what is lying inside me that needs to be expressed, because she will help you and she will come forward for you. The other message that she brought through is that from this point forward, if you are not in alignment with your truth, if you are not expressing your truth, you are really going to feel it. It is going to get louder and louder. It is going to affect your physical body the more that you are out of alignment in that. So if you start getting really bad headaches, if you start getting really achy, if you start getting stomach problems, if you start, of course, getting things going on with your throat, constant coughs, constant sore throats, constant swollen glands, constant problems going on with your ears, it's because you are in misalignment, and this stuff is going to get louder and louder, and you do not want to get wiped out by this stuff, right? So please listen to your truth. Start really honoring that. And if you're not at a point where you really don't feel safe to say it out of your mouth, at least do it in a journal. Deeply connect into your emotions, your wants and your needs, and at least write it down in a journal. You don't have to tell it to the people that it involves right yet if you don't want to, but you need to start somewhere. The most important thing is being honest with yourself. If you can't be truly deeply honest with yourself, then who the hell can you be honest with? Right? You don't have to tell anyone about it. Nobody's going to know, right? If it's just between you and your journal, or just between you, if you don't like journaling and it's just something that you think about while you're doing your workout or having a little walk along the beach, right? So before we finish up, my question to you is, what truths are waiting so patiently within you to be expressed? What desires, what needs, what boundaries, opinions, what creativity and expression and passions are waiting within you to be expressed? And where are you not being truly, truly honest with yourself about what you want, how you feel? So that is what I will leave you with today. And like I said, if you'd like to join us in the Facebook group, I'll leave that below. Also, if you would like to go deeper into teachings with Mary Magdalene, into Circle, where we do meditations, healings, clearings, activations with the goddesses that I work with in the mystery school, as well as doing, healing and getting extra meditations for intuitive connection. Get on the VIP waitlist for the Inner Circle. And of course, I'll put my Instagram link down below also. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Take care of your throat chakras. Take care of your womb space. Love on your womb space. Love on yourself. And I will see you again soon. Bye.